I'm Hunter-Mann. I was one of the archaeologists who worked on the excavation at Driffield Terrace in 2004 and 2005. First excavation was carried out at 3 Driffield Terrace, and that was the first one to identify some unusual burials. There were quite a few decapitations visible during the start of the excavation, and that just carried on. So we knew we had something unusual at the site, and about 6 months later we had a chance to excavate another group of Roman burials close by at 6 Driffield Terrace, and they displayed very similar characteristics, high degree of decapitations. After the excavation we carried out osteological analysis of the human remains, and they indicated that there was a greater number of human remains had been decapitated. We just hadn't seen them during the excavation. The heads had been placed back in the correct position in the grave. Furthermore, there was evidence for trauma on the remains, including blunt force trauma, which indicated that these people had been hit by kind of heavy objects but hadn't actually cut the individuals. Those remains indicated that these had healed, so these people had had this trauma and had then lived afterwards. In contrast, we had sharp force trauma on a number of the individuals, and these generally hadn't healed, indicating that they'd died violently. The population was predominantly adult male, and they were generally fairly well built. So it suggested that we had an unusual group of people who for some reason had been buried together in one part of one of the Roman cemeteries in York. When we were interpreting the cemetery, we were looking at evidence of the burials, how they were laid out, what grave goods were found with them, anything that would indicate how these people were buried and what that represented about them as a group of people. We knew from the burials that they were laid in the ground with a degree of care. They had grave goods with them in some cases. This suggested that there was a certain amount of respect being given to these people when they were buried. This suggests that they weren't criminals, because they're usually buried with no respect, for example in rubbish pits. Another suggestion was that these were soldiers. The problem with that being that there were so many decapitations, this wouldn't really fit with a soldier lifestyle. The blunt force trauma could, in terms of people being trained and being wounded, but those sorts of wounds healing, and the short force trauma, the result of battle, and these people then dying. While we were investigating the cemetery at the post-excavation stage, we had an interesting discovery made on some of the human bone. That was that there were bites from a large carnivore, in all probability a lion or a tiger. This didn't really fit in with a soldier scenario, and all we could really think of was that this was evidence of a gladiator who fought animals in the arena, either as individual or groups. So it also fits in with these people being buried in a prominent position in a cemetery in York with a degree of care, but also having a very violent lifestyle. We have examples from the cemetery of ritual burial processes taking place. We've got examples of bottles used for the storage of goods that would have been used during burial rituals, also feasting that would have taken place on the anniversary of these people's death. That's well documented. We have candlesticks, which again suggestive of rituals taking place at the cemetery, and also decorated vessels or tatsa, which often had incense in them that was part of these burial rituals as well. So overall, these are suggestive of the cemetery that was being used by people to record individuals who were well remembered and were respected even after their deaths. As well as the grave goods that were found in the cemetery, we had a number of finds that suggested that we had a high status cemetery. Even though these finds weren't discovered in the graves as proper grave goods, they did suggest that some high quality finds had been deposited with early burials and then been mixed up and left in later burials. For example, we have a pair of miniature silver tongues which are usually found as votive offerings in burials. Bone hairpins, again indicating fairly wealthy people who were buried with various type of personal goods. A copper alloy pelter, so this is another high quality accessory. Glass vessels, in this case it's been reworked into a disc, but the glass vessels are indicative of objects that would be buried with individuals and often have of oil or perfumes buried with the person as well. So again indicating somebody who's been respected and also has wealthy goods with them. And also a bone bridal cheek piece, so this may well be part of a set that was buried with somebody possibly indicating that they had been a member of a cavalry unit, for example, or associated with horses, possibly in a gladiator situation. So overall, these are indicating a cemetery that has a rich range of goods associated with the individuals.